the Executive Committee meeting of the Community Oversight Board to order. I'll start with reading the appeal statement. Pursuant to the provisions of Section 2.68.030 of the Metropolitan Code of Laws, please take notice that decisions of the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County Community Oversight Board may be appealed to the Chancery Court of Davidson County for review under common law writ of cert. Any appeal must be filed within 60 days after entry of a final decision by the board. Any person or other entity considering an appeal should consult with an attorney to ensure that time and procedural requirements are met. Let's move to, well, I'll do a roll call vote. Roll call for attendance here. Mr. Campbell-Gooch.
Here.
Ms. Ross.
Here.
And Mr. Sweeney.
Here.
All right. Mr. Pinkley, do you have the electronic meeting statement?
Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. So we are eligible to meet today based on Governor Lee's extension of his original executive order suspending the in-person quorum requirements for meetings. So in order to conduct our meeting today, we just need a motion and a second stating that we're doing essential business and doing so electronically to protect the safety and welfare of Tennesseans.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Sweeney and Ms. Ross. Any focused discussion? Not. I'll take a roll call vote. Mr. Campbell-Gooch.
Aye.
Ms. Ross.
Aye.
Mr. Sweeney.
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is approval of the minutes. If everyone has had a chance to look those over, does anyone have any edits, any comments on the minutes? There is none. I will take a motion.
I make a motion that we approve the minutes. This is Brenda Ross.
Thank you, Ms. Ross. Second.
This is Matt Sweeney, second.
Thank you, Mr. Sweeney. Again, any focused discussion on the minutes? Then I'll take a roll call vote. Mr. Campbell-Gooch.
Aye.
Ms. Ross.
Aye.
And Mr. Sweeney.
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. Thank you. So I want to get right into it, assuming that Director Fitcher is back with us. Director Fitcher, are you on the line?
Chair, this is Chris Clausey. She is having trouble getting in. I think she says she's trying to call in on the phone line now, so she's working through that as we speak.
Okay. Do we know? There are two phone numbers in the attendees list. Do we know if one of those is hers so that she can be let in as a panelist?
Let me see. I'm looking that up now. There she is.
So I'm not able to add her as a panelist if she's called in, but I have her unmuted so she can participate.
We hear you, Jill.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes. So let's go into the MOU update.
Yeah. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, okay, great. Sorry about that. I've been having some technical issues. So the MOU update, this was what I sent to you is the final draft of the MOU, and there weren't any huge changes that we haven't already talked about. I sent over, when we had the last meeting, I was scheduled to have a conference with Deputy Chief Mike Hager, which I did that, and I emailed him some of the changes that as I went through the document, and I'll just cover some of those highlighted things. It wasn't but a few changes, and that we agreed upon. And so the first one being let me keep it in order. So in section 4, there was no changes to that section. I think that there was some, we talked about it at one of the meetings, to add language in that section that revolves around the issue of Rule 16 by adding the DA's agreement and attach as an exhibit. And so they had no concern with this. Metro Legal said the current version provides that the agreement is incorporated and it's referenced in that section, which is section 4, section E. And so MMPD believed that the existing language accomplished the goal, and then Metro Legal looked over it and agreed upon that. Any questions about that section? If not, I'll move on to section 5, the confidentiality. We had talked about having that, whatever records that we get, to have those records marked and stamped confidential, and so that was what I requested from MMPD, and so they added that information to the MOU, that records provided under the records MOU will be marked confidential. So that's in section 5, letter B. In section 6, under intake, the change was to read, instead of failure to comply may be grounds for disciplinary action. I asked them to state willful or intentional refusal to cooperate may be grounds for disciplinary action. And so they had no concerns with that change and updated it to reflect that. Under section 8, under administrative leave and alternative duty assignment, that was not changed. It read with the 5 calendar days, just as it was when we presented it. In section 9 and section 10, there was some discussion in our last executive meeting regarding the MOU. There was some language around calendar days, working days, and business days. And, you know, I asked that they would stick with the calendar days, since that was what was throughout the MOU already, the use of calendar days. I thought using that same language would bring continuity to the document. So we discussed it. We agreed upon 45 calendar days. Since they use, I think MMPD has a 45-day time limit on a lot of their investigations. I know that OPA has a 45-day time limit. So we decided to, in the interest of both agencies having some continuity, we stuck with that calendar days, and that section changed from 30 to 45 calendar days. And then in section 13, under crime scene access, there was no real changes there. Everything was left the same. And the only change in that section, in crime scene access, the section in the first letter, crime scene access, that stayed the same. That would be number 1. Under the letter A, we changed the language somewhat because I was concerned that we wanted to have the COB wanted to be able to be on the scene, and it wasn't tied to whether or not OPA was on the scene. And so we changed that language. So it reads that such access shall be identical to that granted to OPA personnel, irrespective of their presence. Because that was the language that needed to ensure that whether or not OPA is there, that the MNCO investigators still have access to the crime scene. And that was the only changes that were made to complete the final document that was left undone. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Director Fitchard. Do the executive committee members have any questions about the changes that were made to the MOU, and this being the final version of it? And if not, Mr. Campbell-Gooch.
I have more of a context question for Executive Director Fisher. Did we lose anything in those changes? It doesn't feel like we did. I'm just checking and making sure that we have all bases covered.
Yes, no, we didn't lose anything in this MOU. I think this MOU is actually, it is a very comprehensive. It gives us the things that we need to get the work done. And it was slight changes from the original, but the changes that we made, I think, are gives us the access that we need. It gives us access to the records, and it also spells out very clearly the two roles. I do think that there was a real good enhancement under mediation. I will say that, and that's under Section 7. We added letter B, which is the executive director and the OPA director will develop and implement procedures for voluntary mediation of complaints. The procedure developed will be appropriately disseminated to employees of both the COB and the department. So we will work together to establish a mediation process. So I think that this MOU is a really great working document for us.
Thank you, Director Fitchard. Any other questions? Ms. Ross.
I'm very satisfied with the MOU and really appreciate Dr. Hildreth and the staff and the board members that worked on this. It's been a long process. And without further ado, I would like to make a motion that we accept the MOU.
Thank you, Ms. Ross. Definitely echo your statement commending Dr. Hildreth's effort here and, of course, the effort of the MNCO staff. Is there a second to the motion to approve the MOU?
This is Matt Sweeney. I would second the motion and also second everything that Ms. Ross said about everybody who worked on this. I think it's a great improvement over what we originally had. So yes, I second the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Sweeney. Any focused discussion? If there isn't, I'll do a roll call vote here. Mr. Campbell-Gooch?
Aye.
Ms. Ross?
Aye.
And Mr. Sweeney?
Aye.
No, I vote aye as well. So thank you very much again, Director Fitchard, and of course, Dr. Hildreth, for all of the work that's been done here. Like Mr. Sweeney said, this is, we've gone a long way since when we first started here, and even with the first draft, the first iteration of the MOU. So thank you again for all of your work here. Let's go to the second item on the discussion updates list here, the license plate reader update.
Okay, thank you. So over this week, I've spoken with Councilmember Joyce Stiles 3 times regarding her legislation regarding the LPRs. She has an amended bill that she's going to be presenting, which is BL 494. It's scheduled for second reading on December the 15th. And so she wanted to talk a little bit about her bill. I also have received a call from Councilmember Jennifer Gamble regarding, I guess, another bill that will be coming forward. I don't have much information on that, but I'll go ahead and talk a little bit before I get into Councilmember Stiles' bill. But Councilmember Gamble, who is the chair over the Public Safety Committee, she is going to have some public meetings to get feedback and to include the community and some experts and just other criminal justice stakeholders, as well as the ACLU, Human Rights Commission, and then, of course, the COB, to talk about the LPRs. And I think that those community meetings, excuse me, are going to be geared towards the implementation, as well as some of the pros and cons of having them in our city. And I think that they may be geared towards a bill that maybe Councilmember Johnston might be proposing, but I'm not 100% sure. I know that when I spoke to Councilmember Stiles, she said that her bill that she's proposing on Tuesday for the second reading is something completely different. So I just wanted to get a little bit into what she has proposed, and she is seeking to make certain that the COB is aware of what's happening and seeking our support. So she said that there's been an increase of stolen vehicles, reckless driving incidents in the city, speeds, over 70 miles per hour, and street racing events that are happening around the city, and not just in her district. She stated that there's been an increase of property damage and destruction and at least one fatality during this time. And she believes that LPRs will be an effective crime deterrent to stop excessive speeders and street racers, as well as can assist with stolen vehicle recovery if the driver is going over the 70 miles an hour speed limit. So she's proposing a 6-month pilot program that will be paid through a nonprofit grant that won't cost the city anything during the test period. Her proposal is for 10 to 15 cameras on mobile trailers with in-car access to be set in 7 or 8 locations across the city where police data has shown an increase in reckless driving incidents and drag racing incidents. The officers will have no access to query the data in the readers that are that they have in their vehicle. The data from the cameras will be stored 30 days and discarded. If there's a hit or a ping, they will be stored. That information will be stored for 60 days if prosecution is underway or if prosecution is pending. And then, of course, there's a state-mandated allowable time to store any information, and that is the 90 days. And so she's proposing hers is 30 days, and then the information that's not pinged will be discarded. And then, of course, it will be stored 60 days if there's some prosecution attached to the pinging. The policies will model Mount Juliet. Mount Juliet uses something called the Guardian Shield, and they also had a pilot program in place before moving forward with permanent license plate readers. And they have been in their county since around 2018. She also mentioned having consultants or speaking with consultants at the Belle Meade and Brentwood police departments, and Belle Meade uses LPRs. And she also talked a little bit about real-time notification for stolen vehicles. What that looks like is a system ping goes out for suspected stolen vehicles in the system. An officer would radio a message that a particular make or model of a car and tag number was possibly a stolen vehicle and proceed to stop it or request someone in the area to be on the lookout for the vehicle. These items or those pings would generate something called a hot list, and that's where they would store the stolen vehicle information. It's on what they call a hot list. She stated that no biometric technology would be installed in the readers, so no facial recognition software is embedded. So we asked who would have access to the LPRs, and I think that's still she's still trying to work that out. She mentioned that that's got to be determined, but patrol officers would not have direct access to the data. She stated that Belle Meade's detectives and above have access, and she may model that procedure. As it pertains to sharing the information, she said that the information will be shared with other police departments in and out of the state if there's a hit on a vehicle that is stolen and belongs to that particular police department or state. She stated that she would like the MNCO to be involved in the drafting of the policies and the auditing of the LPRs, and she would include language in her amended bill to support that. And so that's the takeaways that I received over the three conversations that I had with her. I also wanted to invite Captain Lara into the conversation if he has any information regarding LPRs or if he has any knowledge of what the police department is doing regarding these.
Thank you, Director. Really, there's not a whole lot I have right now. I know we haven't used LPRs, what I know of, for a long time, but it's something that I guess has come up now, and we are looking into to see if they are something that we would like to use. But I know that's something that we'll bring up to Chief Hager and Chief Drake and see if that's something that that is feasible. But I know it's come up in the past. We just don't have them right now that I know of. I don't think we've used them. As long as I've been on the department, I don't remember us ever having them. And I don't know, unless, depending on what the chief says, we may implement them in the future.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I think that, of course, this is what Councilmember Stiles is proposing, and I know that there's still a lot of uncertainty about license plate readers, of course, in privacy protections as it pertains to surveillance. I did ask her, as well as Dr. Valier and Assistant Clausy, we asked her, how did they decide to put them on what areas? And she told us that the areas were chosen based on, I guess, where these street racing is taking place, where they're gathering data on those areas. I also wanted to know a little bit about what was happening in her area specifically, and what she shared was that there had been a lot of property damage, as well as, it's just unsafe because people are, going really fast down like Old Hickory Boulevard. They're charging down Old Hickory Boulevard. She mentioned, as I said earlier, that there had been one fatality, and she said it just poses a real big risk for people. And so I'm going to invite Dr. Valier and Assistant Clausy in. If I missed something that Councilmember Stiles mentioned, if you'd like to jump in, that would be great.
Hi, this is Peter Valier. I think you covered the majority of the conversation that we had with Councilmember Stiles. And I think the important piece that she really emphasized in the conversation was that the proposal that she's making is solely for drag racing and reckless driving enforcement, and that her proposal would be focused only on combating those and excluding other types of uses of LPRs that are common in other jurisdictions.
And the other thing I would just add too is I think it was important to hear that this was going to be just a trial basis to see how it worked, if there was effectiveness in the use of these pieces of equipment for the period of time. So it's not like there's a big undertaking of a huge project that would stay for, however long. So that was something else that the three of us were thought was a positive, that it was just for a trial basis to see. But Director Fisher definitely covered everything. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Clausy. Before we start any discussion here, I wanted to acknowledge Captain Lara. Thank you for being here, and not to put you on the spot, but can you give us a little introduction about who you are, so anybody who's listening can know that?
Yes, thank you, sir. My name is Carlos Lara. I'm one of the captains here. The Chief Drake has appointed me as the Chief Diversity Officer for the department. And one of my responsibilities is he wants me to be just a liaison to the board and to Director Fitchard, just to really try to keep that line of communication open between the board, the director, and the police department and Chief Drake. So my job is really to make sure that the board and Director Fitchard have everything you need. If there's a question, if there's an issue that comes up, my job is to take that back to the department, back to Chief Drake, and with his guidance, figure out the best way to address those issues, as well as if there's something that Chief Drake wants to bring to the board, I'll be that person to bring that to the board and to Director Fitchard, as well as if there's any other things that the board may need, any information that or communication with anybody at the police department that you may be having trouble getting on your own. I'm the guy that will help you connect to whatever section of the police department that you need. So I'm here, to help in any way I can, and that's what Chief Drake wanted, just to be that liaison to the board and to Director Fitchard.
Thank you so much for being here, Captain Lara. Mr. Sweeney, I see your hand up.
Yes. Is the proposed legislation going to specifically limit its purpose and say that the readers cannot be used for any other purpose?
I'm not really sure, Mr. Sweeney. I asked her she said that she was still working on the amended proposal. And so I asked her when she got that completed to send me a copy. And so I don't have a real straightforward answer for you on that one.
Because my thought is, if the legislation doesn't specifically say that, then regardless of what the intent is, it would authorize a broader use.
Thank you, Mr. Sweeney. Mr. Campbell-Gooch.
I had a couple of suggestions. There's a couple of organizations who work on this both nationally and locally in Nashville. One is Walk Bike Nashville. They do a lot of transit things, especially for pedestrians. Not too far away from me is a very dangerous intersection for people walking. And so I've done a lot of organizing with them. And then other side of that is Media Justice. They do a lot of work when it comes to these type of surveillance, replacing patrol officers and taking the role of policing as we move into like a more digital age, especially because it's cheaper. And then I have a couple of questions that I think are nuanced and I don't think are really to be answered right here, but I think that we can struggle through them together. My first question is there was a mention that the council person mentioned that there's a lot of, what was the word used? That there's a lot of, I can't remember the word, I'm sorry, but there's a lot of...
Drag racing? Or...
No, it was something that the council... No, it was outside of the street racing. It was like vandalism or something of that nature, which
property damage.
Property damage. So I was curious if what did the property damage have to do with the drag racing? That seems like two separate issues. One seems infrastructure, and the other one seems more interpersonal, intercommunal. And then another end, I know that they've been using these cameras in other places, but those other places don't have a lot of Black community members. So I'm just curious about how race, poverty, all intersects at these type of initiatives. And then I'm also curious about how we can make, and this, I think this is getting to what Member Sweeney was saying. I'm also curious about how we can both limit the scope of this and make sure this doesn't get out of control, because these initiatives have gotten out of control, very specifically in Nashville, very quickly. And as we move into a new space and time when it comes to budget shortfalls and things like that. So those are just a couple of flags that I wanted to raise. And yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Kamelgooch. I am not sure about were you saying that the LPR technology has been used in Nashville and other places, or
There was Director Fitcher, I believe, mentioned that other cities close to us are using them, and that Styles was talking about like using them as a reference. But I want to say, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I want to say there was mention of Bill Meade.
Yeah.
And I know that once these initiatives have a different function when they come closer to Black and brown communities. So I just wanted to hold that and mention that as well.
Yeah, I definitely echo that concern. I do have a lot of concerns with this, and one of those is, well, if they're going to be strategically placed, and I, put strategically in quotes here, based on data where these crimes are occurring, with drag racing is occurring, where are those places? Are those communities of color? Are they low income communities? And if so, how is that going to affect surveillance there, right? And I'm concerned about us accepting, free surveillance equipment from a nonprofit. It just doesn't. I mean, what strings are attached with that? Why are we being given free surveillance equipment here for law enforcement purposes? It raises some red flags for me. And LPRs are currently illegal, or the use of LPRs are illegal in Nashville right now, and that's on purpose. And there was legislation for that a couple of years ago. I'm not sure when, but to me, I want to know what was the original intent, spirit of banning it in the first place, and why is it okay to make exceptions for it now? Mr. Sweeney, I've seen your hand up, and I'm not sure if you hadn't unraised it or not.
Sorry, I just failed to take it down.
Okay. Director Fitcher.
Oh, yes. I just wanted to ask Member Gooch, I didn't get the name of the first place that he mentioned about the transit. And then I wanted to also say that she talked about the property damage, and what she said in the property damage was that where they're doing the street racing or drag racing, whichever one what term you want to use, that they were doing like donuts and leaving huge black marks on property that belonged to commercial businesses. So that's what the destruction of property is. That's at least one aspect that she mentioned.
Oh yeah, that makes sense. And I grew up around those skid marks all over the place. They do that. They do that on Woodmont all the time. But the first place is a local nonprofit called Walk Bike Nashville. Okay. They do infrastructure things. And yeah, because we needed a crosswalk in Bordeaux at one point in time because it was just so much traffic. People were walking, and so I reached out to them, and they was able to help organize some community members around that. So I'm like, what would it look like to engage them around infrastructure things, and so that we not just only solving these issues with just punitive measures.
Right. That makes sense.
Yeah. I agree, Mr. Kamelgooch, and I think Walk Back Nashville is a great organization to work with. At my job at Conexión Américas, we've definitely partnered with Walk Back Nashville for several years. So I think it would be good to partner with them on this as well. I saw some hands up, but then I think Mr. Sweeney.
Yes, just one thing that Director Fitchard said. I wasn't certain whether Member Stiles was going to actually put some provision in the legislation that MNCO or COB was going to somehow play some role in what she's envisioning. And, I think we need to be really careful about that. I mean, we want to be at the table all the time, but I don't know that we want other people defining a role for us or potentially overextending us or getting us in a situation that in some way might compromise us in any way. So I think we need to be very, very careful and sensitive about anyone putting us into legislation without our close review and consideration of both the idea and the language.
Thank you, Mr. Sweeney. I think you make a really good point there. And I think that the way I understand it, Councilmember Stiles was indicating that she wanted our input, or she wanted us to be involved at least in the drafting or the making of the policy surrounding the use of these, if I'm correct, Director Fitchard?
Yes, initially she spoke about putting us in the legislation regarding an auditing of these to make certain that they're being used appropriately and there's no abuse by MMPD. But when we spoke to her yesterday, I was asking her who was helping or what policies was she mimicking and who was going to help with the policy preparation of this. Because as we saw with the body cameras, the policies were written. I gave a very small amount of input, which I'm not really even sure it was used. But I will say that MMPD drafted their body camera policies without, working closely with us. And so there are some things within the body camera policies that I think that could be strengthened. And so we were talking to her about that in regards to policy preparation. And she mentioned that she definitely would be open to helping to work along with her and others to draft the policies.
Thank you, Director Fitchard. And I think that even if we're written in it at all, we still have that authority to audit those policies. So, yeah. Any other discussion on this? I think there's enough questions here that we should probably take it to the board on Wednesday, but I know that the second reading of this is on Tuesday. Director Fitchard.
Yeah, and I was thinking, if you guys are in agreement that maybe we can ask Councilmember Stiles to, talk to us about her legislation at our board meeting on Wednesday if she's available and willing to do it. I thought that might be a good way for us to ask her specific questions regarding her bill.
I think that's a good idea, assuming that it passes second reading. Do any of the executive committee members have any thoughts on that, or any differing thoughts on how to proceed? Mr. Campbell Gooch.
I think that's a great idea. If I just have one request, if someone from the staff could just email it out to everyone so people can just have be prepared to have a focused discussion with the council person. I think that would be dope. And then I'm also curious on what it would look like to be able to engage the community members who are living in the area where these cameras are going to. And I'm pretty sure the council person has done that, but I'm also curious about how we do that, because if it's a pilot, they're probably going to be looking to expand it into other areas. So yeah, I'm just curious on what it would look like to let everyone know that they're thinking about putting license plate readers, and see how everyone feels about that.
Agreed. Director Fitchard. I'm not sure if your hand was up or not, Director Fitchard at
Oh,
that.
I'm sorry. I was talking. I was saying to Member Gooch's point, I think one of the things that the council member mentioned was that within the 6-month pilot, because she thought that having this pilot was an effective tool to measure whether they're needed in our city. So she said that, that's why she's wanting to do the 6-month pilot, to see the effectiveness of them. And then, of course, within that 6 months, if it deters drag racing, street racing, or whatever, then since they're going to be mobile on trailers, they could move them if it picks up in another part of the city. But I think ultimately, I think it is good to have her to send this information to the board and then have her really talk about what the intentions are after the 6 months, or how she's going to measure if this is an effective tool.
Thank you, Director Fitchard. I pulled up what I think is the current. No, that's the wrong one. Okay. So can we make a plan? Do you want me to reach out to Joyce or Councilmember Stiles, or would you like to do that, Director Fitchard?
No, you can do it if you like. I mean, either way, it doesn't matter to me. I think you can do it since you haven't had an opportunity to talk to her about it. That would be good.
Okay, thank you. And now I do have pulled up the language of the ordinance here. I just wanted to read it to you. So basically saying the sole purpose of enforcing state and local laws pertaining to reckless driving, especially for the prosecution of persons engaged in illegal drag racing activity at speeds in excess of 70 miles per hour. So further, the section shall not apply to the use of license plate scanners at mass gatherings within the right of way or when intersections are unlawfully shut down to accommodate drag racing activity. So that's what we're working with here. To me, speeds in excess of 70 miles per hour seems a bit broad and a very low threshold to be able to use these license plate readers. Ms. Ross, I saw your hand up earlier. Do you have anything to say?
Yes, I'm just a little disturbed that it's going to second reading. We just found out about it, 2 or 3 weeks ago? And I'd like to know what community input, I'm talking about particularly the neighborhoods, if they have designated neighborhoods. But I am very familiar with the speeding in the Antioch area and know that this may be something that is definitely needed in the Antioch area. But once again, my concern, as always, is that we find out about it after it's going to second reading. And we don't meet until the third, a day after that. Thank you.
You're right, Ms. Ross. Yeah. So if there's no more discussion on this, I think the plan will be I will reach out to Councilmember Stiles to see if she can attend our meeting on Wednesday so we can get a little bit more information from her and be able to ask her questions. Mr. Campbell-Gooch.
What's the bill again?
It is BL 2020-494. All right, if there's nothing else on that, we can go to the next item on our agenda here, which I don't have in front of me right now. The Policing Policy Commission report recommendations with Dr. Valier.
Thank you. So the Policing Policy Commission report was issued late last month and made a number of recommendations that involve the Community Oversight Board and Metro Nashville Community Oversight, either directly in specific areas where they would like us to be conducting reviews or audits on specific aspects of the police department, or in mentions of coordinating with the police department for specific outcomes. Ms. Orozco and I took that report and pulled the 9 recommendations that are specifically directed towards the Community Oversight Board and would have some aspect of that we are being asked to do something in response. And so those 9, first is ask the police department to work with MNCO to conduct a review of MMPD's knock and announce policies and make suggestions for improvements that draw on national best practices of review. MMPD this week issued a roll call training with updates to the search warrant process for no knock and knock and announce warrants. And so they have made revisions on their policy based on some of the discussions from the Police Policy Commission. The second is require that serving knock and announce warrants will automatically be grounds for review by MNCO. It's within the authority already of the COB that all those incidents can be reviewed by our office. Number 3 would be require that MNPD captain overseeing body-worn cameras reports to the police chief concerning content from the videos that document use of force and compliance by officers, and that the captain works collaboratively with the MNCO and other community organizations. And so they're requesting collaboration, which we are, and Director Fitchard is in contact with Captain Whited over the body-worn cameras. The 4th item is that the police department should cooperate with Metro Nashville Community Oversight and the Community Oversight Board to allow for quarterly random audits of MMPD records, including arrest reports, body dash cam footage, and personnel files to determine whether racial and or other bias appears to be a factor in arrests. The 5th recommendation where we're mentioned is that the police department should consult with MNCO prior to formalizing any future initiative targeting high crime areas in order to review the intent, purpose, and potentially negative ramification of the initiative prior to implementation. The 6th is that the police department should conduct a full-scale review of the continuum of force with the MNCO that strongly considers and remedies the harm to community relations and the disproportionate impact that teaching police presence as the first step of the continuum of force creates in communities of color and other marginalized communities. The 7th is that the police department should extend full access to MNCO for review of the following, which includes requests for the receipt of weapons and vehicles under the 1033 program, requests for grant funding from the federal government that will be used to purchase military-style weapons and vehicles, and proposals to purchase military-style weapons and vehicles from vendors. The 8th is that new recruits should receive COB education, exposure, and engagement that offers an opportunity to explore and discuss MNPD and COB's working relationship and the role that COB plays in engaging and representing the community. And finally, to allow MNCO to review all MNPD policies, procedures, and trainings to ensure consistency between policies in the manual and prohibitions that are covered in training. So these 9 come directly from the Police Policy Commission report, and are directed or include the COB in some aspect.
Thank you, Dr. Villier. Does anyone have any input on these recommendations, or any thoughts about how we would go about complying with them, or even implementing them, Mr. Sweeney?
At some point, I think that we need a kind of extended discussion outside of just the executive committee as far as how closely we become joined with the police department. It's important that we have an opportunity to review and recommend as far as policies, and it's important that we be able to audit things. But the closer our engagement with the police department comes, the more difficult it may be for us to perform our responsibility. We are not, and we shouldn't be seen by anyone as being a department or a division of the police department. And I think we have to be careful as far as what functions we're going to perform and how we're going to perform them, and to define them, to keep them more in kind of a review and auditing position as distinguished from a partnership, because to the extent it becomes a partnership, then we might be called upon to examine something that we've been part of creating, which I think is problematic. So I just think that we have to be careful in how we do this. And then I think we also have to have control over our own agenda. We have limited resources. As we've noted when we've considered several things at our last meetings and what we were going to undertake and what we couldn't undertake, at least immediately, because of the limited resources that we have. And the more that somebody else defines our role, the less control we're going to have. Sorry about that.
Thank you, Mr. Sweeney. Very good points there.
Yeah,
Sorry?
the less control we're going to have over that process. I apologize for that interruption.
Not a problem. I definitely think that you bring up some really good points there, Mr. Sweeney. Ms. Ross?
I also agree with you and Mr. Sweeney in reference to control and how much we work for them. And I like for this report recommendations to come up before the full board and make sure that all the board members have this information prior to the meeting.
That sounds good, Ms. Ross. I think we can do that. I wanted to add, if anyone was reading the Tennessean past day or two, there was an op-ed in there by Arnold Hayes titled Policing Policy Commission Report Shows Little Will Be Done for Nashville's Public Safety. And in it, he says that the report basically promoted stock shelf policies with no real plan for enforcement. These are low-hanging fruit recommendations that will not move the needle. He called the commission, he said the commission's paternalistic top-down approach produced no measurables in the report to track progress and disregards perceived systemic problems within MNPD like racism, sexism, etc. Given that, I mean, we ourselves have expressed some reservation about the entire process, and now we keep hearing these criticisms from the community as well. What can we do to make sure that we're still doing the community's bidding, right? And not, as we've just been talking about, letting maybe this commission kind of dictate what we do. I think it's important that we start listening to more people like this and maybe inviting them to our meetings as well, to give their perspective on what types of issues that we should be focusing on. Because I do agree that that's that top-down approach that maybe a lot of us have been focused on, rather than, issues springing up from the community. Mr. Camelgooch, you had your hand up, but
Yeah, I transitioned to my phone, so it's a little weird being on the phone. But yeah, like as you say that, I remember us having conversations when the commission was first announced, and us kind of knowing that the commission was a duplicate of services and pretty much embodied the majority of what we did. And in that space, I think some of us came to a collective realization that it felt like a waste of time. And so I noticed when reading the policing commission, it seemed great. I mean, it seemed well put together, but it was also void of any actual vision when it comes to reimagining public safety in Nashville. And unfortunately, I think we might have missed a tremendous opportunity to actually shift things from both a legislative level and a cultural level when it comes to the people we pay our tax dollars to. So I wanted to echo what you were saying, Chair, in that way. And then also say, like, we had community members who went to the commission with all their ideas, but their creativity was limited by the establishment's willingness to actually put dollars to ideas. But I do say I'm like extremely hopeful, because I feel like we're in a place where the narrative is beginning to shift. And I think people are realizing that in order to thoroughly serve our folks, we're going to have to be in the community next to them. So I just wanted to voice and echo that. And also wanted to say, like, I think both the staff and the community members who were a part of those commissions put those long hours into it. So I'm really hoping that we can have something tangible to come out of those things.
thank you, Mr. Camelgooch. Ms. Ross.
Yes, I was able to read Mr. Arnold's article in the Tennessean, and he brings a great view from the community. And if everybody gets a chance to read it, I think that would be great. And also, particularly because it's from a community person. Also, it would be a good idea to invite him if other board members thought it was would be feasible to our next meeting or following meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ross. I think that's a great idea, and I can try to reach out to him. I can try to find his contact information. So assuming the agenda is not too packed for next Wednesday, which I don't imagine that it is, putting 2 guest speakers on it would be good. I like the idea of having him come and hearing the perspective from the community, because we have been hearing a lot from the top and not from the community. Anything else on that? If not, I can move on to new business and announcements. Director Fitchard.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask Mr. Pinkley to talk a little bit about the next board elections, nominations. And I mean, we have a little bit of information. He has reached out to a couple in the council. So I'm going to let him tell you a little bit about that. It's still in the works, but Todd, if you want to jump in, that would be great.
Absolutely. So I have reached out to the Metro Clerk's office, who has contacted the leadership on the Metro Council about setting up the applications and interviews for upcoming board members. They are currently drafting the announcement that should go for an approval sometime this month. The timeline that they have currently set up would have new board members coming on in February as opposed to January. Within the Metro Charter or within the Metro Code, there is a exception for board members to roll on. It's up to 60 days past their actual end date. So if it does end up being that new members don't come on until the end of February, the current board members who are supposed to roll off on January 31st would be able to stay on until their replacements are announced.
Do you mean December 31st? Or
the board member terms end at the end of January.
got it. Okay. So the board members who are, the board members who could be rolling off should be attending the January board meeting.
Yes, they should attend the January board meeting. Their terms end on January 31st, 2021. And they may be extended through February, depending on what the council actually finalizes as the timeline.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Pinkley. Any questions about that process? Mr. Kamaguchi, I see your hand up. I'm not sure if...
Yeah, I just was curious about what board members are supposed to be rolling off or what seats are up.
The members that are rolling off are Mr. Sweeney, Ms. Ross, Ms. Davis, and Dr. Lewis.
Thank you.
Any other new business or announcements? Mr. Kamaguchi. Mr. Kamaguchi.
Okay, yeah, I'm sorry. My phone is ridiculous. I did wanted to share with everyone great news. We have went 72 days without any gun violence in our in one of our main target areas. That's Cumberland View Apartments, also known as Dodge City. To drill down even further, in that area, that's where 1/3 of all gunshots rang out in Nashville prior to last year. So while the entire country is on an uptick in gun violence, one of our main target areas in Nashville is seeing a historic low in crime. So I just wanted to announce that here because that is something that us over at Gideon's Army, we're extremely proud of.
Thank you for sharing that good news, Mr. Kamaguchi. Any other new business or announcements? And if not, I will take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Sweeney. Is there a second? Need a second on the motion. Thank you, Mr. Kamaguchi. I'll do a roll call vote here. Mr. Kamaguchi.
Aye.
Ms. Ross.
Aye.
Mr. Sweeney.
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. Thank you, everyone. Have a good weekend, and we will hear each other, not see each other next Wednesday.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Bye.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information about this and other programs, visit nashville.org.